Welcome to today's webinar, brought to you by Delphix, Datavail, and Couchbase. I'm Mary D. Ojala, Conference Program Director, Information Today, Inc. I will be the moderator for today's broadcast. Our presentation today is titled Cloud Migration Best Practices, Risks, Requirements, Strategies, and Solutions. Before we begin, I want to explain how you can be a part of this broadcast. There will be a question and answer session. If you have a question during the presentation, just type it into the question box provided and click on the submit button. You will receive an email response within a few days. Plus, all viewers will be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card just for viewing today's webinar. And now to introduce our speakers for today. Tom Seith, Solution Architect, Delphix; Michael Agarwal, Director and Global Practice Leader for Cloud Databases, Datavail; Matthew Groves, Product Marketing Manager, Couchbase. And now, let me pass the event over to Tom Seith, Solution Architect, Delphix. Welcome to the broadcast, Tom.
Thanks, Mary D. Glad to be here. As Mary said, my name is Tom Seith, and I've been at Delphix for about 7 years now. And prior to that, I was with EDS and HP for about 12 years doing enterprise architecture globally. So today we're going to talk about cloud migration. And what is cloud migration really? It's essentially the transition of traditional on-premise workloads to cloud-based infrastructure. Sounds easy enough, but this can be a daunting task given the complexity of today's business systems. Taking a well-thought-out approach can minimize, if not eliminate, some of the common pitfalls that are encountered when moving workloads into the cloud. By gaining a clear understanding of what you want to accomplish and digging into the dependencies between different applications, you can create a comprehensive plan and guarantee success. So why do people move to the cloud? Well, the customers that I've talked to, probably cost is the most common answer that I hear. They want to lower their costs. They want to see where money's being spent. They want to get more bang for their buck. All kinds of things, but the dollar really drives most of the cloud migration projects that I work with. But also, you can modernize your applications, taking advantage of new technologies, cloud services. All of that comes into play, and that is a real benefit to moving workloads to the cloud. And finally, staff productivity. If you can make better use of the people that you have on staff, why not, right? You can use cloud managed services to get rid of the tasks like patching and server maintenance and the things that come along with running infrastructure. So if you get your workloads into the cloud effectively and use these cloud managed services, you can free up your staff time to do more creative and useful tasks. Now, what can go wrong with a cloud migration project? Well, a couple things, maybe more than a couple, but some of the pitfalls that we try to minimize or eliminate are listed here on this slide. Running before you walk or moving too fast is probably the prime pitfall that I run into the most. You can't just start moving things into the cloud and expect to gain success that way. You need to start slow and achieve success incrementally. You need to spend some time understanding both your workload and the destination that you're moving it to. And that will help you move that workload without wasting time. Biting off more than you can chew, or overambition in a project. The Big Bang approach is difficult to pull off with a cloud migration. There will inevitably be hidden complexities that should be understood and planned for. And if you can pick the low-hanging fruit first, systems with the fewest dependencies, migrate those and get a feel for how that works, then you're much better off in the long run. And relocating pain, or basically lifting and shifting workload. Over time, things get outdated. And if you just pick up workload that is, say, 20 years old on premise and move it into a cloud environment, it becomes extremely difficult. And so what happens in the end is you end up with costs that are the higher than they were before. Excuse me, and everyone is still too busy. So at Delphix, we have worked with a number of customers to move workload into the cloud environment. I've listed a couple on the side of this slide here. Dentegra, or formerly Delta Dental, worked with Delphix to perform what we call a thin migration, or basically to move their non-prod environments into the cloud. They use both on-premise masking of data and our replication product to move the data into the cloud. They reduced the time that it took them to get fresh data to their developers from days to hours, and they realized a 20x increase, or excuse me, 20x reduction in the time it took to get their non-prod operation moved into AWS. By using Delphix in the cloud, they have also greatly reduced their storage costs while simultaneously providing more copies of the approximately 16 terabytes of production data. Now, their offshore resources also have greater access to the data they need when they need it. Similarly, Cal State University and their partner Unisys are also embarking on a thin migration to the cloud. Cal State has been a long customer of Delphix on-premise, where they were virtualizing Oracle on Solaris. When they decided to move to the non-prod workloads to AWS, they knew they had some work ahead of them, right? Solaris is going to be difficult to move into a cloud. So they started by replatforming the Oracle databases from Solaris to Linux, implemented our masking product, and then migrated their non-prod workloads into the cloud. At this time, they're all in the cloud with their non-prod, and they're evaluating whether to keep production on-prem or to migrate fully into the cloud. So with all these challenges and pitfalls, how do you actually move forward? Well, you answer this in the planning phase. Now, there are many benefits to moving your workload, but taking an old, tired legacy application and simply changing the location from where it runs will not take advantage of cloud benefits. On the other hand, you can easily get stuck in the myriad details of upgrading and modernizing the application, and that can derail a project completely. So you must balance moving quickly versus planning for enhancement and redesign. Now, some workloads are easy to transition to the cloud because they are already virtualized or run on systems that can be virtualized. But there are times when workload is not so easy to migrate because current infrastructure requires something like bare metal servers, say AIX or Exadata systems, for example. So if your migration involves these challenges, you might be limited to the clouds where you can migrate to, or you may want to look at a multi-cloud adoption strategy. When you do start migrating workloads, I have found that it's often easier to start the migration with non-critical environments. This is where development usually happens, and getting this into the cloud first allows you to explore cloud-native features while working out other details of the migration. Now, migrating your workloads to the cloud is essentially has a very heavy reliance on data. It's relatively easy to move an application or source code into the cloud. But databases all sit behind these applications, and they all require basically read-write data sets in multiple places in order to support the actual production and all of the downstream data that is needed to complete that stack. The footprint of this data is actually the smallest in production. There are oftentimes 5x or 10x the number of databases in the non-prod environment. And all of this needs to be moved up to the cloud. The Delphix Continuous Data Platform solves this challenge by continuously syncing data from production and replicating it to one or more clouds incrementally. Once the data is in the cloud, Delphix can then provision full read-write thin clones for the environments that need this data, and it can do it in an automated fashion. Delphix can also create physical data sets in addition to virtual copies. These can be used to feed performance evaluation environments or can actually be used for production cutover. The Delphix software is API driven and can be integrated seamlessly into new or existing CI/CD pipelines to deliver data that's needed, when it's needed, where it's needed, and without human intervention. The data need not come for production, but it oftentimes does. But I do also have customers that create custom or specialized data sets that are ingested and then distributed to where they are needed. Now, these days, security is also a major focus, and the penalties for a data breach are very sizable. So safeguarding your data while migrating to the cloud is also paramount. And in comes the Delphix Data Continuous Compliance. Masking data in lower environments is an important security practice no matter where that workload is running. And the Delphix Continuous Compliance Engine achieves this by working side by side with the data virtualization engine to integrate masked data with virtual data delivery. Data sets can be profiled using one of several out-of-box profile sets that help identify data that may be critical for GDPR, CCPA, and some of the other listed on the slide there. Once the data has been identified, it can be masked with our out-of-box algorithms, or users can create custom profile sets and algorithms to address more complex masking needs. The masking can be tied to provisioning of the data so that the operation takes place all at the same time. So we ingest and profile, mask, and then provision non-prod copies. This can be done over and over repeatedly and all done through API control. Finally, once the cutover has taken place, then you can continue to resume normal operations day to day using the same masked data platform that was used to help you migrate your workloads into the cloud. So I would like to thank you for your time today, and it's been a pleasure being here. You can feel free to reach out to me directly, or you can visit our website at delphix.com for more information. Back to you, Mary D.
Thank you, Tom. And now let's pass the event to Michael Agarwal, Director and Global Practice Leader for Cloud Databases, Datavail. Welcome to the broadcast, Michael.
Thank you, Mary D. This is Michael Agarwal. The discussion today is around cloud migration best practices. But before I go there, kind of quick background about me. I have 24 years in experience in IT. Currently, I'm a global practice leader at Datavail. I actually grew around as a developer initially, then become a DBA manager. But last 8 years, I have been doing lot cloud. And in this presentation, I'm summarizing my last 8 years of cloud migration experience in 10 slides and 15 minutes. So hopefully I'm able to convey that message. Little bit about the company I work for. Datavail is a Oracle Platinum partner, AWS Advanced Consulting partner, and Azure Gold Competency partner. We also have some IP and products which kind of make things easier for managed databases and service management. And we have over 1,000 employees in US, Canada, India, Sri Lanka, and Colombia. So before I get to the risk and lessons learned, I think it's kind of important to understand what are the major milestones in cloud migration. And I have done over 10 large scale migrations. And if I have to summarize it, as you see on the screen, initially you have to look at what you have on-premise data center. If you have thousands of servers, you have to figure out which application talking to which databases, and then that's where assessment phase comes in. And also in some cases you have a data integration with downstream systems or external systems, so you have to document that and map that. Then you have to do some migration planning, and then I will get to what that migration planning means in next slides. And then you have to create a landing zone in cloud, landing zone, whether it's Azure or AWS, you know, your virtual networking, keys management, identity and access management, all those aspects need to be created. And then, so you see on this slide, I kind of have two different phase of observability solution. It doesn't have to be that way, but a lot of times in a bigger enterprise, you have it's a big move going to cloud from changes to the CI/CD to patching to backups to HADR, logging, monitoring, alerting, all those aspects of it. It becomes a lot more initially. And that's why I prefer to kind of just have a basic one, start with the non-production, and then later on, as we get to the production migration, have a more comprehensive solution in place. The one thing I always ask customer is why you want to go to cloud, and I think Tom covered some of that earlier on. Cost is some of that, but sometimes the other features like able to get the infrastructure you need on demand, able to be able to do the security by scripting, those aspects kind of start to take benefit. But I think it's important to understand why a customer wants to go to cloud. In some cases, they have this new innovative app they're trying to develop, and going to cloud means able to go to market faster, and that's maybe the reason why they're going to cloud. But the reason you want to understand that is, in some cases, if let's say cost is a factor or performance is a factor, you want to be able to collect the before and after metrics to kind of compare, does it match with the expectation you had with the cloud. So we talked about discovery phase. So how discovery is done. A lot of customers already have a VMware or Hyper-V. So within that software, you are able to export the reports. If it's a small data center, 10, 20 servers, you can possibly do some kind of mapping manually. But in a large data center, sometimes customer doesn't have application to database mapping and dependency mapping, all that aspects of that you need for cloud migration. In that case, You either have a agentless tool or agent-based. So agent-based tool will be installed on each server. There are many software out there from Device 42, Flexera, AWS application migration tool, Azure has Mover. So there are many tools out there. Some are agent, some are agentless. But the idea is to collect information about thousands of servers and what are the dependency, and we need that as because we can't move all the servers at one time. We need to group them in migration waves, and that's where this discovery tool is very important. And if you already know which cloud you're going to, AWS, Azure being the main ones that I have experience with, there are tools which AWS and Azure also provide. So this is where I think it's important as I'm sharing my 8 years of experience with cloud migration. The agentless tool do a okay job, but the agent-based tools do a much better job because they actually monitoring that at an endpoint being installed. And sometimes customer just has a hesitation, and these agent-based tools are used thousands of times in many other customers, so there's nothing to be scared of or shouldn't be any reason, and they have very little to no performance impact, so there shouldn't be any hesitation to put that agent-based tools. And the other thing is sometimes the integration piece you may not know until like a month-end process kicks in, where you say, oh, I need to send this accounts receivable, accounts payable to a downstream systems, and that's where that connection happens. So sometimes it's good to kind of let run agent tool run for a little bit longer, at least a week. If you can cover month end, that's even better. If you have a external data integration, that sometimes get missed. So if a HR system need to send information to a payroll information system, which may be separate, uh, in this case, you may want to move actually the HR system and a payroll together to the cloud so that that dependency is maintained moving to the cloud. So in my presentation, this is the most important slide because I think sometimes customers think that they have to move everything to the cloud, and that's not true. In some cases, it's almost impossible or very hard to move. For example, mainframe systems, or you have a voice response system or telephone systems, they're very hard to move to cloud. But everything else, for the most part, can move to cloud. So I think that's where this planning comes in, is if something is going to retire anyway because you have a new version of app or you bought something, exclude that from moving to cloud. If there's a reason you want to keep on-prem, like the telephone systems, mainframe, that is out of the migration plan. The last four, rehost, replatform, repurchase, refactors, those are, I think, the majority of the work, of course. Rehost is simple. Simply, you want to do a lift and shift, not looking for any modernization, not looking for platform as a service, but it's a quick way to get to the cloud. Replatforming, I like that because this is where you start to take benefit of the cloud, where if you go into platform as a service, some of the things like OS and patching, like if I go to AWS RDS, for example, or Azure managed instance for SQL Server, the OS and patching, all that is taken care by the cloud provider. So I'd start to take the benefits of the cloud a lot more. In some cases, um, you may have a homegrown HR, payroll, hiring, accounts receivable, accounts payable, those kind of systems. But you may say, okay, I'm going to Oracle ERP or SAP for that matter, and then I need to retire that. So you going for a more of a SaaS platform where you just access that as a service, and in this case it's okay because that's not your focus. Your focus is your business, not necessarily your HR payroll systems. Refactor is also a big thing simply because when you move into cloud, this is where a better CI/CD or microservices or a going from, if you have very high throughput systems, going from relational to NoSQL databases. All those refactor is giving you the benefit of going to the cloud, but doing some work as a part of it to make it even a better experience. So this plan is very important, and we work with customers, kind of isolating those workloads in different categories so that we can plan for cloud migration. So what are our lessons learned for a assessment planning phase? For large scale data center migrations, you have 5,000 servers, 10,000 servers. You want to keep it as simple as possible, because if the focus especially is data center exit, if the focus is application modernization, of course, then we look at workload by workload. If the and then going to cloud, the one thing, of course, you have to worry about is the cost, and that's where right sizing matters. And what we find is, in most cases, the average save. So if I have 8 core VM on-prem, I might be able to get away with just 4 cores on the cloud, because they are newer processors, faster. The on-prem maybe 3-4 year old, and because of that, and then all the optimizations that cloud offer, they give a better performance compared to a 2 core on-prem is not as good as the two core on cloud, and that's where right sizing and cost optimization comes in. If we are looking at target resources planning, all those aspects of it, that's where we want to use the tool. There are many tools out there. I mentioned some of the names earlier on. It will actually give you instance types and cost estimates. So when you managing a large scale data migration, it's kind of important to use those tools to kind of make things faster. Initial landing zone, you want to look for long-term growth. That's where that multi-cloud architecture in AWS and multi-subscription architecture in Azure is kind of important to kind of lay the right foundation. The biggest thing is the last two items is sometimes there's a hesitation of using cloud native tools. So network security infrastructure is very different in on-prem compared to cloud. You're using infrastructure as a code. Your network is defined as a code. Your security auto remediation could be defined as a code. So a lot of things changing, and even HADR is a lot easy to do now in cloud. I just have to look at multiple region or multiple observability zone, and it's just so much easy to configure there. During the migration phase, we want to start with non-prod, get some lessons learned under our experience. Start with non-critical. So even though it's non-prod, if you have a regular release going on, development release, it becomes critical that even non-prod stays up. That's why non-prod, non-critical, let's start there, then go for critical system, which is non-prod, and then production. I covered earlier why basic observability to just get going, and then as you learn and get better, crawl, walk, run, you will improve your observability solution from logging, monitoring, alerting, and even you might add auto remediation and maybe security alert and all those aspects of it. And then before you go to prod, you have the maturity and the experience to do a really good job with the production migration. So what's the right recipe? Well, it's kind of hard to summarize in one slide, but here it is. Of course, do infrastructure as a code. It's kind of good to learn through the console, but delivery-wise, it should be infrastructure as a code. We should do migration waves, starting with non-production and then going for production later on. If you have a large-scale data center migration, you may want to hold on and kind of minimize modernization effort initially, and then focus on lift and shift first and then modernize later. And you want to pick a partner who has experience working with cloud migration. Sometimes all that experience can help, and a lot of partners may already have a code repository to accelerate your cloud migration. And then, of course, the cloud knowledge, the skills, the certification, all those aspects are important to do the things the right way. Otherwise, your cloud can become another data center with similar problems like you had in a data center. With that, I wanted to thanks everybody for attending this, my part of the presentation. I'm back to you, Mary D.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Now let's pass the event to Matthew Groves, Product Marketing Manager, Couchbase. Welcome to the broadcast, Matthew.
Thank you very much, Mary D. And thank you, Tom and Michael, for laying down some really great high-level concerns for migrating to the cloud. What I want to focus on is a little more narrow. It's about database migration. I know Michael touched on this, certainly. But I'm from a company called Couchbase, and we make a NoSQL cloud database. And I want to talk to you about that and how that might help you with some of your migration concerns, even if you're going from relational to NoSQL, like Michael kind of alluded to. You want to make some changes. One of the reasons you go to the cloud is to pick up that functionality that you don't currently have on premise, right? So things like if you're stuck with a mainframe, for instance, you might want to bring in Couchbase to add some additional functionality. So a quick overview of what Couchbase is. It's a database. It's a distributed database, memory first, multi-model database. I want to focus on that word multi-model. It's maybe not something you've heard before, but Couchbase is a data store, but multi-model means you can interact with this data in a multitude of different ways. So Couchbase certainly can act as a key value store. You can look up data by key. It can also act as a document database, so you can look up JSON data and query JSON data. An edge or mobile database that provides synchronization. A text search engine, and HTAP or HOPE, operational analytics, is another model that you can use with Couchbase. And the great thing about Couchbase is that with the exclusion of mobile, because you need to install something on mobile devices, but all these things are built into Couchbase in a single platform. It's not a bunch of extra plugins or add-ons that you need to get this functionality. So it's all built in there. And one thing that you don't see here is relational database. So Couchbase is not relational, but it does actually support a relational style data model with SQL and with ACID transactions. And that's what makes it a good choice to migrate to a NoSQL database if you want to get the benefits of a NoSQL database. And a lot of our customers have done just that. We have a wide variety of industry leaders that are using Couchbase, or Couchbase customers. So just for instance, all of the top 3 credit reporting companies are using Couchbase. All of the top 3 GDS companies that power online travel, half of the top 10 telecom companies, and so on. So you may not have heard of Couchbase before this presentation, but I like to scroll through my phone and see all the apps. And I know that Couchbase is powering many of them. And some of them I can't even show you the logos of that are very big players that Couchbase has as customers. Why do they use Couchbase? What do they value from Couchbase? So we actually came up with a way to poll our customers through this third-party service here to ask them why they chose Couchbase and what features make Couchbase most valuable to them. So the top features are performance. Couchbase, it provides a memory-first architecture, so you're often reading and writing directly from RAM. Replication, which is a great thing we're going to talk about when it comes to cloud and synchronization between data centers. And scaling. Couchbase is designed to scale out very efficiently and cost effectively, as opposed to a traditional legacy database where vertical scaling is kind of your only option, and you have to spend a lot of money to do that. Couchbase can do it more efficiently. And the things that make us different than other database solutions is that listed here on the right-hand picture. So something called SQL++, used to be called Nickel N1QL, but this is a full SQL implementation for JSON data. So as you're trying to migrate to different databases, you don't have to just throw away all your organizational knowledge about how to write SQL. You can still use that in Couchbase. XDCR is replication between data centers, automatic replication of data. And flexible schema, of course, it's JSON data, and memory first, I mentioned that, which gives Couchbase such great performance. And the use cases that, this is not a complete list, but this is many of the most common use cases that Couchbase customers use us for. So session and profile management, this is personalization, right? Where you're trying to store information about customers in a flexible way. And session management is improving performance and availability of the user experience, right? And so these go hand in hand in personalization. Product and service catalogs, and especially like virtual products, like say concert tickets, for instance. It's a very popular use case because this requires tracking typically a lot of interactions that lead up to the one transaction, right? So before I buy a ticket, I'm going to be browsing around at prices and seats and looking at all kinds of information about the venue and all those different things, and logging in, creating an account. All those interactions lead up to the eventual transaction of me buying the tickets. Mainframe and legacy offloading. I think Michael mentioned how difficult this can be to migrate to the cloud. But what we can do with Couchbase is we can actually sit alongside your mainframe database and provide a degree of modernization with that mainframe, or at least until you can move off of that mainframe, right? One or the other, right? So you can help add some modern functionality to your legacy mainframe databases. And the last one is Customer 360. You may not have heard this term before, but it's a way to build a single view of a customer, however you define that, from multiple different systems, right? So if you have, say, 15 different systems in your enterprise that all have information, one piece of information about a customer, you can pull all that data together into a flexible database like Couchbase and get a single view of that customer. So instead of waiting hours or days, possibly, to move data around, you can get that data in one place immediately. Okay, and so what I want to talk about now is the multi-model. So I touched on that briefly, and what does that mean? Let's go into that a little more detail here. So these are the highlight the core advantages and benefits of Couchbase, right? So number one, flexibility with JSON that allows for easy modification of schemas, of values, can be very flexible and can be queried from Couchbase. SQL++ is kind of the main way of querying data beyond key value lookup. This is the familiar syntax, everything you'd expect from SQL. It's not just a SQL lookalike, it's a full implementation. So select, where, join, insert, delete, common table expressions, window functions, anything you could think of in SQL, it's going to be there in SQL++. And memory first. So this means that there's a built-in managed cache. Again, another component you don't have to buy and bolt on and manage. It's built right into Couchbase. I'm not going to touch on these too much in the short time we have, but full text search is like a Google search for your data. This is all on the same pool of data. So you're not moving data around between different services and what I like to call database sprawl, which you're probably familiar with, running 4 or 5 different databases for one system. But it's all the same pool of data. It's just creating a different type of index for it. Analytics service, same kind of thing. This is to enable reporting, BI for big data sets, complex queries from Couchbase, and also external data sets like S3. An eventing service, this can programmatically, I always have a hard time saying that, respond to data change events. So new data is inserted, new data or old data is deleted, and you can actually write code to respond to that. Just a quick comparison of SQL++. I want to drive this home because it's one of my favorite things about Couchbase is the query language. So on the left here is MySQL. This is a popular relational choice, and that's a relatively straightforward but not trivial SQL query there on the left. And on the right-hand side is a popular NoSQL database and the equivalent query in a non-SQL query language. Now in the middle here, we've got Couchbase using SQL++. And this, you can see it's just as concise and declarative as MySQL, but it's still using flexible JSON like the database on the right. So flexible and familiar is what we're going for with SQL++ query language. It's one of my favorite things. So I normally show a demo. We don't have a lot of time for a live demo, so I just took a few screenshots. I just wanted to show a relational migration in process here. I've done this multiple times. But we've got a SQL Server here. This is a screenshot of SQL Server. You can see that we've got SQL Server contains databases, sometimes known as catalogs. Each database contains schemas. So an example here of a schema is human resources or person. Tables inside those schemas. So you have department is in the human resources schema. Address is in the person schema. And then inside the tables, you have rows of data. You're familiar with that from like a spreadsheet, just seeing those rows and cells of data there. Now, I mentioned that Couchbase has a relational style modeling available to it, and it fits very nicely with those things I just laid out. So instead of a database or a catalog, we have something called a bucket. Instead of a schema, a bucket can contain multiple scopes. And inside of a scope, instead of a table, a scope can contain multiple collections. And inside of a collection, instead of rows, it can contain multiple JSON documents. Now, there's not just the name differences here. There are some functionality differences, of course. So the bucket level, the database level, is what enables the clustering, the distributed nature of Couchbase that allows it to scale out more efficiently. And inside the collection and the documents, we're storing JSON data, and we're not storing any sort of predefined database enforced schema, which is what enables the flexibility of JSON data. And so with that in mind, we can just kind of move data from one to the other in a relatively straightforward manner. Now, it's still going to be relational style, right? But it's still going to be flat data, and we can start to work with that data and start to transform it, which is what Michael was kind of indicating in one of his slides there. We can remodel that data to better fit a JSON data model. And the benefits we get from this, you can see here, I've kind of mapped these concepts to each other in this table, right? So at the server cluster level, we're getting the scalability, we're getting the high availability of a distributed database. And then the next few things, they all match up. They're all kind of equal to each other. But one thing, the multi-model approach here is the things that relational can't do that Couchbase can. So the only way you can interact with data in a relational database is with a SQL query. And you can do that in Couchbase as well with SQL++. But you can't just do a straight key value lookup like you can, certainly not from a managed cache that's already part of the database. You can't necessarily do a full text search. I mean, some databases have some limited full text search built in, but usually you want to pipe that data into a separate tool like Lucene, for instance, to try to do that search. So now you're adding more tools that you have to manage and manage the integrations for. Mobile sync, I've not seen a relational database that has mobile sync, certainly not built in. That's something you can do with Couchbase. And analytics, usually this means you have to stand up another relational server somewhere in order to get workload isolation and then copy that data over on a regular basis. With Couchbase, it can do that automatically in the same cluster, and it can do it in real time. So just to wrap up here, and then we'll get to hand it back to Mary for some questions perhaps, is that Couchbase really has something for everyone. So no matter what your role is in an organization, I'm typically identify with that first row, the developer row. That's the kind of features that matter to me. I like that SQL is familiar. I like that we have transactions available. I like that there are SDKs for all the popular programming languages. And I like that there's an index advisor because unlike Michael and Tom, I don't have much of a DBA background. So creating indexes is challenging for me, but an index advisor tool helps me to find those a lot easier. For architects, things like having a full text search built in just means less complexity. Having that structure of a bucket, scope, collection, and documents helps with multi-tenancy or microservices and organization. And then at the operations and DevOps types of organizations, there's all kinds of things available to enable continuous deployment, continuous integration. So a Kubernetes operator, for instance, Couchbase Capella, which I'll talk about here in a second. This is the fully managed Couchbase version of Couchbase in a cloud database as a service. Managed cache, again, built right in. So you don't have to add another tool, another integration to support that. And just Capella, I wanted to end on this. This is something that I think everyone should go out and try. So it's a fully managed database as a service. It's Couchbase running hosted in the cloud. So you don't have to worry about all the patching and maintenance and things that were mentioned in the earlier presentations. Just let Couchbase handle this, handle the scaling and the upgrading and all the security patches and all that kind of stuff. And there's a free trial available. You can go to cloud.couchbase.com/signup and sign up for that free trial. And there's different tiers available if you want to go into more of a proof of concept. You might look at the basic or developer pro level, and then of course enterprise for production. And the same use cases apply here with Couchbase Capella. You can do the same kind of stuff that Couchbase is good at because it is just Couchbase, fully managed in cloud. Okay, so that's it. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for coming, everybody. And I'll hand it back to Mary D.
Thank you, Matthew. And now we will move on to questions from our viewers. And let me remind you that if you do have questions for any of our three presenters today, do put those into the ask a question box, and we will try to get to as many as possible. So we do have some questions here. And let me start with this one for Tom. Can I keep my non-prod running on Delphix even after I've migrated to the cloud?
Yes, you can. And I absolutely recommend that you do. Delphix is a tool that is very much at home in non-prod. And we have customers that use it on-prem. We have customers that use it to help migrate to the cloud. And then we have customers that fully use it in the cloud after they're done with migration.
Okay. And let's see, what else have we got here? Michael, how long are cloud migration products? And I'll bet you can't say that definitively.
The question is how long the cloud migration process takes?
How long are cloud migration projects?
Yeah, I have done as soon as like 3 to 4 months for a small scale cloud migration. Some which are, let's say thousands of servers, and every customer has a peak season. So, we try to avoid peak season, things like that. So those could be multi-year projects. Ideally, you want to get it done in a year, but yeah, they range from 2-3 months to up to sometimes multi-year project.
Yeah. Matthew, let's see here. What tools are available to migrate from Relational to Couchbase? You talked quite a bit about Relational.
Yeah, well, it's a common question that comes up is because Relational is so popular and ubiquitous, but I want to move to a NoSQL database. How do I do that? And so there's lots of approaches. There are some tools out there. We have a partner called Molo17 that makes a great tool called GlueSync that can do real-time synchronization between Oracle, SQL Server, and then to Couchbase, to and from Couchbase. That's a great tool for like a gradual migration, or even just syncing from a legacy system over to a modern database. So if you want to take that approach, there's other open source tools that are available, and there's a number of command line tools that are built into Couchbase or otherwise available that can help you take more of a DIY approach if you need more control over where and how that data is moved around. So there's lots of tools available for that.
Could you say the name of the company and the name of the tool a little bit slower?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Molo17, MOLO17. And the name of their product is called GlueSync. It's GLUESYNC.
Oh, I love that name. GlueSync. That's cute. All right. Let's see, what else we got here? Well, I don't know. Tom, did you want to jump in on the other question here? Is how long do cloud migration projects take?
Oh, sure. I have I have seen a few that have run longer than a year. I'll echo what Michael said, that I'd like to have them finished in a year. And it sometimes depends upon where we're going, right? I talked about a couple of customer success stories that I've labeled as thin migrations. It's a great first step. It's a kind of an easier transition, I think, to just sort of go with the premise that you're leaving on-prem alone in terms of production. Look at what it takes to move your non-production. It's I'm not going to say it's not disruptive, because anytime you move anything, right? You run the risk of disrupting workloads. But
Yeah.
non-prod is a little bit more elastic. And so, um, you know, it tends to be an easier shift. And then, like I said during the presentation, it allows you to get your developers and the folks that are working on new stuff into the environment where they can test cloud features. And I think that's extremely helpful in the retrofit or the modernization of the actual
Hmm.
production application when it does move to the cloud. So um, I also have worked with some customers that I'm not going to say everything succeeds. Sometimes
What?
they
No.
jump right in, they start moving systems, and the next thing you know, we have to put the brakes on. So as much as I love stuff
Oh, dear.
projects to get over quickly, right? There is some benefit to taking a little bit relaxed approach, step back, move the non-prod, and then reevaluate. Right.
Good advice.
Hopefully, I answered your question.
Yeah, no, this whole question about how long do cloud migration projects take, how, um, with that time frame, how was that affected by the pandemic, and do you see it changing going forward?
I think the pandemic has resulted in more work for me, quite
Really?
honestly. Um, yes, because travel has been pretty much eliminated.
Right.
I was spending a considerable amount of time in airplanes and airports and going to meet with customers, and I love doing that. The pandemic has basically shuttered that. And that means
Yeah.
that I have the time that I would have been spending traveling now sitting here, um, you know, still working virtually with customers over
Hmm.
Zoom. It's not as pleasant, but it's functional. And, I think it has, basically made the work days longer and,
Mm.
probably more
Right.
productive. But I I would like to get back to the old school. I do. Virtual work whiteboards are not quite as good as real whiteboards.
I hear you. Michael, did you want to add anything?
I think, yeah, I mean, similar journey like Tom mentioned, a lot more effective, but you kind of miss that uh, interaction that you can do in person. But I think
Hmm.
from the customer point of view, I think it impacted every industry differently. So like
Yeah.
online education, they have all of a sudden they have a lot more demand. Healthcare struggling, so it kind of has a
Yeah.
different impact in each industry. Shortage of workers is another factor of it. So because of that, there are a couple of dimensions changing from customer point of view. They may have more funding, less funding. The cloud migration may become more critical if they're
Hmm.
having an outage or struggling to keep up with the demand. They may want to go to cloud faster. So those things
Mm.
happen. So it does have impact, but I think it really depends from customer to customer, industry to industry, and then also where they want to take on some of the responsibility on their own, and where they actually need a partner like Datavail to come help them. So it kind of all changes, all the dynamics.
Okay. So, Matthew, we've got one here for you. Can Couchbase work with the multi-cloud strategy, and if so, how?
Yeah, I forget if it was Tom or Michael who brought up the multi-cloud strategy, and this is something that Couchbase can do really well, and also differentiates it from similar competitors. I mentioned this, I think, in the presentation, something called XDCR, Cross Data Center Replication, and that is just a really quick and simple way to set up replication between two different Couchbase
Mm.
clusters, so two data
Hmm.
centers or more, right? And you can specify one way or bidirectional with those, so it's multi-master as well. And so once that's running, it's synchronizing data in real time. It's all memory to memory. So it can support a variety of scenarios. So the multi-cloud we just mentioned. So if you're running on Azure and AWS, for instance, or a multi-region approach if you're running on East and West data clusters, right, or data centers. Also a hybrid approach. So this might really help with the mainframe issue as well, for hybrid or for disaster recovery. So it can work with, for instance, Azure and an on-prem data center. So those things are all supported with Couchbase, and they're really simple and easy to set up, syncing data between Couchbase clusters. And it also supports, I think GDPR was mentioned, supports filtering. So for things like GDPR and geofencing, where certain types of data are not supposed to leave that region, that's also supported in that filtering, in that XDCR process.
Interesting, because that's getting a little more complicated by the day, isn't it? Well, that is all the time, excuse me, that is all the time we have for questions today. And we apologize that we were unable to get to all of your questions. But as I stated earlier, all questions will be answered via email. I would like to thank our speakers today, Tom Seith, Solution Architect, Delphix, Michael Agarwal, Director and Global Practice Leader for Cloud Databases, Datavail, Matthew Groves, Product Marketing Manager, Couchbase. If you would like to review this presentation or send it to a colleague, please use the same URL that you used for today's live event. It will be archived for 90 days, and you will receive an email once the archive is posted. If you would like a PDF of the deck, go to the handout section once the archive is live. And just for participating in today's event, you could win this $100 Amazon gift card. The winner will be announced on May 31st. We will reach out via email if you are selected as this month's winner. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.